and we don't have our royalty-free RPG Tavern music going today for some reason. Um, but oh
I'll
my
just grab
goodness.
my fiddle and start
Yes.
the
Yeah. A little bit of a devil went down to Georgia,
yeah.
chicken picking on there. I'm sure somebody else has a banjo. We'll get a proper bluegrass going. It'll
There we
be
go.
Katie,
it'll be
please tell
great.
him. Please tell him that's Alice's Diet Coke before I do.
All
Sorry,
right.
I'm in the meeting. I brought an actual drink for my boss, and one of these stupid people that works for AI EDU just sat down and drank it, like from her seat,
Okay.
like
Okay.
completely not aware or whatever. I know that we're letting people in, but
No,
I'm just
Who
very
needs
frustrated with the
metaphors? It's just
yeah.
happening real time.
yeah.
I'm just like I said.
The AI company is drinking your drink as we speak. So yeah,
Yes,
not there's not a
the
more
leader
on
the leader
point.
of the organization AIEDU is drinking the drink that I bought for my boss.
It's
God.
extractive theft
Yeah,
all the
Right,
way down,
yeah.
isn't it?
it tracks, doesn't it, Audrey? It tracks.
All right, and that has been our panel discussion for today. I'll see everybody this afternoon. We we kind of nailed it, but
Yeah.
my goodness, yes. Well, if that isn't a good way to start this next 90 minutes off, I don't know what is. But thank you all so much again for joining us day 2 here at Conference to Restore Humanity. We've got an excellent conversation coming up here. Chris, if you could just show the next thing real quick. Hopefully that's our there we go. If in the chat, just to kind of get our brains going as you drink your morning coffee and everything else, just share some shout outs from the first day. Those could be awesome new connections you made, highlights of our day yesterday, of our flipped keynote conversation with Dr. Sarah Fine, an excellent workshop with Naval Karuni about nourishing caregiver collaborations, and a couple of really fun afternoon events, world building with Mal, and Chris leading us through the Skull tabletop RPG, or any aha moments. What were things that really clicked for you yesterday? Messages that are resonating that you're bringing into our conversation this morning and throughout the rest of this afternoon. Alternatively, if you're interested, right, I always like to start professional conversations thinking about those principles of emergent strategy. Again, I know yesterday I was really reflective on that fractal nature of things. The large is the reflection of the small. That small is all. But what's on there that's resonating for you? And we can just give some folks some time to respond in the chat while I take care of some other announcements about our events and today's sponsors. So this afternoon, then, our workshop is going to be with Emma McMain on critical social and emotional learning, moving from SEL as a checklist to actually embracing and building authentic social emotional learning and school culture. And then we'll have a brief. I mean, it's 45 minutes. I'm kind of shocked at how small it is. Going to go like that, but with Great Plains Action Society, a great Midwestern indigenous group with some folks that we know, talking about resisting and indigenizing. How can we dismantle oppressive systems and rebuild with frameworks focused on indigenous knowledge, culture, and community? And that'll be alongside a panel of 5 young people who are, either in high school or attending universities here in the Midwest, involved in that work. And of course, I want to talk about our sponsors today. So first is Learning Inspire Ed, led by Mike Nicholson. It's a forward-thinking education consulting agency committed to learning and supporting the development of student agency, with a focus on moving away from constraints and toward possibilities. Learning Inspire Ed helps school districts create the best conditions for students to lead their own learning. And Mike currently works with districts across the United States, from Colorado to Virginia, from Florida to Vermont. I know he was just out in California as well, in this game-changing work. And of course, Teacher-Powered Schools as well has launched in 2014 as an initiative to highlight teacher-powered initiatives and support teacher teams in securing collective autonomy to design and run their own schools. It's a collaborative of people working to create student-centered learning environments, build capacity of educator teams, and advocate for teacher-powered opportunities. In addition to their website, check out their upcoming conference this October in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Sokol Moran Partners, led by renowned educators and leaders Ira Sokol and Pam Moran. I know Pam was around in the Discord. Pam, if you're in this chat here, you can give a little wave. As they work with educator teams of all shapes and sizes to develop schools that support children as they grow into creative, inventive, empathetic, and collaborative lifelong learners in our communities, in our economy, in our world. Their innovative workshop model helps schools use portrait of a learner models to implement practices that help learners thrive in life, not just in school. In the Lab for New Teaching, it's a new organization offering professional learning for educators that's affordable, progressive, and hopeful. The lab creates spaces where collective expertise becomes curriculum, empowering educators through collaborative reflection, dialogue, and frameworks that foster human connection in education. KMS Intercultural Education, it's a consultancy firm that develops capacity for bridging differences through a mutual understanding of our unique lived experiences. Through workshops, education on cultural frameworks, and coaching, KMS strives to build empathy and dialogue skills to better our communities. You can learn more at kmsinterculturaled.com. What School Could Be highlights innovative work happening across the United States and abroad with a focus on trusting and supporting educators for building schools that prepare young people to lead fulfilling lives in a future begging for higher order competencies. This work includes podcasts, writings, and documentaries, including the soon-to-be-released multiple choice that answers the question, what if our students saw college not as the only path, but as one of many paths that lead to a life full of purpose? And you could typically find the What School Could Be folks with the WSCB in their names here. I'm seeing Mel as I'm scrolling down through it real quick. Not sure who else is joining us there. Okay, we've got Lynn, cool, Kennedy from KMS, Josh in the house, love it. And finally, of course, in addition to being among HRP's closest friends and collaborators, STEMpunks Foundation is dedicated to creating a more inclusive and equitable world for neurodivergent and disabled individuals. By challenging traditional systems and advocating for accessibility, STEMpunks promotes a supportive community that celebrates diversity and empowers people to thrive in their own unique ways. Their innovative approach combines direct support with advocacy and education, driving change in both public perception and policy. And of course, stempunks.org is their home on the web as well. Well, my goodness. In what feels like a very short period of time, generative AI has been fused to every aspect of modern life. You can't open software without being prompted to try their AI tools. AI summaries lead your Google search results, and AI images and videos, which have exponentially improved in their realism, dominate political discourse. Just this month, too, we were treated to the headline AFT to launch National Academy for AI Instruction with Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, and the United Federation of Teachers, promising a groundbreaking $23 million education initiative to give free access to free AI training and curriculum for all 1.8 million members of the AFT that begins with a state-of-the-art brick-and-mortar facility in Manhattan. So someone clearly, for better or worse, has an idea about the relationship of AI and education and is acting with intention on it with the velocity that millions of dollars allows. But to return to one of the themes I pulled out of yesterday's conversations, there's nothing inevitable about either the shape of AI or its relationship to education. As the late anthropologist David Graeber wrote, the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it's something that we make and could just as easily make differently. And with any technology, AI is a tool developed by humans, not left here like the monolith from Kubrick's Space Odyssey. A quick norms reminder as well as we head into this, and I take a drink. Especially, I think, for this conversation today, it would really surprise folks who are at the sort of cutting edge of AI discourse, I think, and who are AI critical, just how much everyday classroom teachers and administrators are using Gen AI tools and are being pressured to do so either implicitly through embedding in LMS and other, education, ed tech, or explicitly by school and district leaders. And I know we wouldn't be having this conversation, and none of our guests would have committed themselves to this work and this dialogue if we knew all the answers ahead of time. As Mark Fisher wrote 12 years ago in Exiting the Vampire Castle, we need to learn or relearn how to build comradeship and solidarity instead of doing capital's work for it by condemning and abusing each other. This doesn't mean, of course, that we must always agree. On the contrary, we must create conditions where disagreement can take place without fear of exclusion and excommunication. And my hope in this conversation with our incredible panel of guests today is that we can replicate some of that same intention and velocity that that OpenAI and Anthropic and these others have in a humanizing direction for AI and EdTech in education. And I'm honored to welcome Shana V White, Audrey Watters, V Dow, and Charles Logan to this space and for that purpose today. So join me, folks, in welcoming all of our wonderful guests here as I scroll through the 30 messages in the chat that I had missed. Now, we don't have to take every question round robin here in the next hour and 15 minutes that we have, and I would encourage people to go ahead and put questions in the chat as we go through it, or be prepared to raise a hand to ask them. But I also prompted our guests to take a couple of minutes just to introduce themselves and their work, and then to share their perspective on the question that we're collectively addressing in our fireside chat today. What, if anything, should be the relationship of AI and EdTech to education? And since Audrey is just to my immediate right or left or wherever she is on the screen, I'll have you go ahead and go first for this one, Audrey.
Thank you. So, initially I was like, oh, I'll just wing it. And then I started to talk to my husband last night about what I thought I'd say, and I waffled on for at such length. I thought, oh, I should write something down. And I did, and it turned out, no surprise, into quite a rant that I'm going to read very quickly, but just kind of come at you with a very long answer, which is, I think, um, AI out of schools, right? Um, the thing I want your takeaway to be, one of them, is that the phrase artificial intelligence was coined in 1956 at a conference at Dartmouth, which last time I checked was a school, right? AI has been in schools now for 70 years. Anybody who wants to tell you a story that all of a sudden in 2022 AI magically appeared is selling a story of fear and FOMO, a story that tries to convince you that everything is changing so fast, faster than it's ever changed before. And if you don't get on board, if you don't buy their product, hire them as a consultant, then you're going to be left behind and your students are going to be left behind. And of course, what's been in schools for the past 70 years hasn't been called artificial intelligence, in no small part because I think educators know better, right? And because educators know that that word intelligence is associated with standardized testing, IQ, and all sorts of racist regimes and eugenics initiatives. Educators know this, right? And that is the phrase that folks are leaning into right now, not personalized learning, not adaptive learning, not learning analytics, not Google, right? An AI company, or any of the other digital products that schools have been sold under different labels, but essentially do the same sort of thing, should tell you right there that folks are feeling pretty comfortable with the ranking and sorting and hierarchy of AI, right? That this is race science. That old bell curve of Charles Murray is back and big and repackaged with a very fancy chat interface. And I'm appalled, really, that people would think for any minute that the future should involve a technology whose foundation is inextricable from war and white supremacy, right? So we've had 70 years of AI. We've had, by my accounts, 100 years of personalized learning, this fantasy of educational psychologists, many of them eugenicists, and businessmen seeking to automate education, to replace teachers with robots. We've had 30 years, right, of education policy dictated by computer man Bill Gates. We've had 15 years of education policy dictated by the Mark Zuckerbergs and this idea that social media is going to connect us all when in fact it's ripped communities apart. Sort of algorithmic arrangement of information that's given us Brexit, Trump, genocide, anti-vax hysteria, Alex Jones, Trump again. We spent 2 years in Zoom school. We haven't dealt at all with the trauma of that. And it's really no surprise, I think, that during COVID, ChatGPT emerged along with this resurgent techno-fascism. The techno oligarchs have embraced and funded and are pushing AI in schools. I think things are very hard, very scary right now. We all want a magic push button that gives us quick, easy answers with a friendly interface that says, aren't you clever? But I think we can do better. We have to do better. AI is the antithesis of education. It's the antithesis of democracy. And it is, in many ways, the antithesis of the future. So big, hard no from me to AI.
Thanks, Audrey. Let's see, who else I got? Charles, you're immediately next.
I have to follow that? Oh man.
I know.
Hi everybody. I'm Charles. I'm a PhD candidate in learning sciences at Northwestern for another month, and then I'll defend my dissertation, start a postdoc. More importantly, though, I'm a former high school English teacher, former university educational technologist, father of 3 young children who are off at camp and hopefully having a good time. I also wrote down my response. And so, yeah, wanted to just read what I wrote here. So when Nick shared this panel's title, I thought the question sounded familiar, and it actually occurred to me maybe that was intentional. And then I realized where I'd heard a version of the question before. And that is, a student journalist posed a similar question to the computer scientist Joseph Weizenbaum in 1985. The student asked Weizenbaum, who invented the first chatbot, Eliza, and later became a vocal critic of the technology, quote, "What, if anything, do you think should be the role of the computer in education?" Weizenbaum gently chided the student and called the question, quote, "upside down," because it started with the, quote, "the instrument." He went on to say the questioning, quote, "should perhaps start with the question of what education is supposed to accomplish in the first place. And once one has identified the urgent problems, then one can perhaps say, here is a problem for which the computer seems to be well suited. I think that's the way it has to begin," end quote. Today's urgent problems include worsening climate change, deepening educational inequities, disappearing bodily autonomy, and rising fascism, to name a few. I fail to see how AI technologies, and especially generative AI technologies, as almost all are currently designed and deployed, can help address these urgent problems. And in fact, these technologies make these problems much, much worse. So what should be the relationship between AI and EdTech to education? I think we should teach about and against these technologies in order to bring into focus ways for building solidarity across communities in and beyond schools to enact the kinds of humanizing education and political movements we need so desperately today and tomorrow and tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you, Charles. I'm going to just keep going down the line here. So we'll go Shana.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shana V White. I am the Director of CS Equity Initiatives at the K4 Foundation. Unlike the 2 previous brilliant speakers, prepared no statement. I just think that everything is a shit show, and I'm tired of people doing things to education, especially K-12 education, without permission. The idea of consent and tech bros are literally like the opposite of each other. And I'm tired of kids being forced to have to deal with their bullshit all the time. And sorry for my language. But basically, my big hang up with everything is that, as Charles kind of alluded to, and Audrey, of course, eloquently said, is why are we not still giving people the right to refuse this stuff? We're literally forcing it into their systems, their phones, their computers, without asking if they want it, and asking, do they need it? And I think the big thing in education, just in general, as a former classroom teacher, is what do you need is what I would ask my students all the time. What do you need to be successful in my classroom? And that success looks different for every single student. But AI, again, with this idea of eugenics and assimilation, wants to basically take a variety of cultures that exist in this world and sum it down to one big lump sum of shit and basically say, oh, we're all just supposed to believe what we're told when that stuff comes spewed out to us. I think the right to refuse has got to be like tantamount, especially going back to school. Unfortunately, in Georgia, my kids go back to school in 2 weeks, so that they are educated to say, I don't want to engage with these tools. And I'm telling them why. And I think we also have to empower students, because most students that I know, my kids as well, they think AI is a bunch of shit. Like, they don't believe that it's valuable to them. They do not care. And a lot of them don't know about the environmental impacts, which I know that tech bros completely gloss over. You have literally an entire community in Memphis that's filled with Black people that cannot breathe because of Grok and Elon Musk's AI system there. And so you have all these kind of environmental racism impacts. You have the fascism that we see apparent and all this stuff. And it's kind of like, okay, so how are we literally turning a world over to this next generation that literally is going to be unlivable? Like unlivable as human beings, unlivable, like environmentally, just unlivable. And my problem is that people need to know that they should be able to refuse these technologies and push back on them and don't have to accept them. And I think the idea of education, just like EdTech and all the intersections, is tech bros want access to student data. Like when you get down to the bare minimum, they want student data because it's the final frontier that they cannot conquer. And they are like colonizers. They want to colonize the education system. They've tried, as Audrey mentioned, with Mark Zuckerberg. They start schools, all this stuff, and nothing has come to fruition because the idea is not centered around humanity and not centered around the actual human beings that sit in those classroom seats every single day. So I think that AI and EdTech should stay far, far away. I would love to yeet AI into the sun. I know that that's not physically possible, but if I could, I would yeet all AI tools into the sun like yesterday.
All right, V, you're up.
Hi everyone. Oh goodness, I'm gonna meet my imposter syndrome head on and say that I'm a little out of my depth here. I don't have a breadth of expertise in education, and I don't even have a background in machine learning or technology of any form. I'm a sociologist. And when I started at our nonprofit Cortico.ai, this was years before AI really changed everything in the discourse. And as a sociologist, I was hired initially as a conversation analyst. And I'd like to offer, I feel all the things from the previous speakers. Sometimes you want to scream into the existential void some days. But I do see some intriguing silver linings, and I imagine that most of us do, because why would you be an educator if you don't have an optimistic mind, right? So for me, as a sociologist who started off as a conversation analyst at a little nonprofit that helps people build technology for the social good. And yes, technology obviously can be good. We work closely with MIT Center for Constructive Communication, which was born in a very pivotal year, 2016, which I don't know if you were paying attention, but that was like a global quake. Our director, and CEO was the former chief media scientist at the artist formerly known as Twitter, skedaddled in 2016 during the sort of the Trump-Obama transition to go back to create a research lab where dedicated people really want to see AI human-steered, human-led, and humane, right? And what we do is some of the tools that is just in our little corner is already seeing such great traction. So people do the same things. They talk, they listen to each other, they teach each other. And now with AI in the mix, I don't have a prepared statement, but I would say that in one view is that AI has been compared to the advent of the electrical grid, right? To electricity itself. It's transformative. And, when electricity came to the classroom, that changed everything. Yes, it illuminated, it expanded, it extended learning hours, it polluted. It also showed in unflinching clarity how ugly things can be, ugly human impulses, right? Maybe AI has similar facilitations. It can illuminate, extend, it can lift, it can inspire. So I'm going to put in the chat some information on the nonprofit, on MIT's C3, one of many, many, many organizations and research labs that are focused on this very thing about how to make AI good, and a link to a youth-led student project in which I hope it's in there. Did I put it in there? Yes, Opportunity Youth Network. Kids who basically went out, leveraged slow AI, not slick AI, slow AI, to support their conversations about their world and their identity. So that's my little ramble. Thank you.
Thank you, V. And I think what I so appreciate about that is a reframe away from the AI hype cycle, which is a language that I'll borrow from a conversation I had with Charles last year about, right, a vision of AI that is cooked together by what I think is frankly like a real toxic, tech bro industry that we've really pointed to and emphasized greatly. And I wonder then if there is a kind of counter insurgency almost in that of reclaiming a more humanized vision of it that I wonder if we could explore for a little bit just based on that statement, V, because I see a lot of promise, as do frankly some people in the chat as well, right? About accessibility tools. Someone mentioned Goblin tools. Someone mentioned pathfinding for mobility devices. I know I've read articles too about language preservation. There's a lot of promise in AI as a technology, sort of as a means to a more humanizing end, for sense-making tools to parse huge amounts of qualitative research, as you're talking about with conversations. And I know the folks on the ground at the Newark Opportunity Youth Network have done, and that Human Restoration Project has participated in as well. And we were there at MIT this spring, right, to participate in this student day of listening, which was so powerful. And I was able to meet so many of the staff in the Center for Constructive Communication. And honestly, I was surprised to see so many of the critical pedagogy books that I have on their shelves too, right? They've got Meredith Broussard. I saw Freire. I saw all these things. I saw a lot of AI criticism and skepticism. Do you sort of see your role for that as creating this humanized alternative for the promises of this technology, as opposed to the one that is being sold and sort of forced on us, the slow versus the fast, the homegrown grassroots versus the, I don't know, the imposed sort of colonial vision? V, yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, is that the V?
Yeah. Well, and then I'm also super curious. I mean, Shana, for your perspective too, but V, if you get us started on that.
I think it's imperative that
Okay.
humans first, I mean, whether you take it from the stance that we have no choice, which seems fatalistic, that should ignite your fighting spirit, right? Like it's either, if it motivates you, you could go us or them. But if you want another way to see it is that if human nature can be dark, human nature can be light. And so I don't see how people, while they, Shana opened the door for cursing, but yeah, let's bitch and moan all the time about this and do something about it. We should, right? I think it's imperative. And for some of us, I don't think it can be stopped, that you would continue pushing back no matter what.
I think that's great. I'm seeing, I like Trevor's question in here. I can just open it up for anybody here, but Trevor's question is like getting right to that too. What does it look like to extricate LLMs from the admittedly shitty, extractive, and colonizing logics that produce them? And to what extent is that possible, advisable? Something as we wrestle with and by Donnie, I'll get to here in a second too. I'll open that to anybody. Is to what extent can we? How can we do that work? I'll open that to anybody.
I don't think that it is redeemable.
Okay.
I think that the what we have with the large language models, although it's being presented as this sort of incredible technological breakthrough, but really I think it's a breakthrough of computational power and the amount of data. So literally founded on a kind of on resource extraction and resource utilization that we can't sort of good intention our way out of. It's the amount of electricity and water that goes into creating the training for LLMs is not a negotiable, despite what Eric Schmidt says, sort of magically, where AI is going to fix the climate crisis for us. And I think that the other problem, even with smaller AI solutions and machine learning, is that they're based on data from the past, right? And particularly on things that are digitized. And so much of the world, so much of the majority world, but even within the minority world, so much stuff isn't digitized. It is, as Shana was saying, why student data is so interesting and appealing, because it is this sort of pool of resource to be extracted. But much of our lives are not part of the machinery, and the data pool that these machine learning is trained upon is the data from the past. And so if we think just within education, right, what that means that these algorithms are being trained on is particularly racist. It is particularly ableist. It is discriminatory against people who speak different languages. It is discriminatory against queer kids. It is discriminatory against women. If you were sort of thinking about what's the big pool of education data, it is it is discriminatory data. So the kinds of things that are going to be generated, the kinds of insights that are going to be predicted are going to reinscribe the flaws and faults of education's past. What we can do with democratic principles and practices, with human practices and principles, is make a break from that past. But when we hard code this algorithmically into our practices, into our ways of being, into our knowledge generation, we become unable to escape from history. And I think that one of the beauties of education is that we grapple with the past, but we tell students the future is something that is not written. But what AI does is it writes the future. It inscribes the future based on the sort of algorithmic replication of data from the past.
I think the other thing to think about the data piece, you have a lot of Native communities that have been fighting forever just against colonization. But then you have this data sovereignty, who owns the data, and people are not really understanding, kind of going back to that. Like, I don't have to freely give personal information, data, whatever, being something as basic as the TSA checkpoints now with the facial recognition. Like, a lot of people don't know, because I've been in lines because I'm traveling so much, but like, I literally say, you can refuse to take this picture. And they're like, really? And I said, yeah, you do not have to take this picture. I was like, you just show them your ID. And they were just like, well, what does it do? And I said, it goes into a system to help them train and recognize people's faces and take certain demographics, so a Black woman, an Asian man, etc., and have their models make generalizations about certain types of people. And I said, that to me is not a very helpful thing for me. I don't think it's helpful for just society in general. But people don't know these things. And I think it's the same thing with environmental impacts. I was at a conference earlier in January, and I was speaking to this junior in high school, and she was telling me that her dad was really big on wanting her to use ChatGPT. And so she sat there and showed me how she used it. And she's just like, well, do you have a problem with that? I said, I'm just wondering, like, what is kind of the end game here? And I said, do you even know about the environmental impacts? She's like, what do you mean? And I said, do you know how much water you just wasted showing me what you did to pull up your calculus answer? And she's like, are you kidding me? I had no idea. She goes, I wish you came to my school and told me and all of my friends how much of an environmental impact that us using ChatGPT does, because I bet a lot of us would stop using it. And again, we don't listen to students. We literally bump them down and say what they're saying is not of value or that they don't care. A lot of kids don't even want this stuff. They really don't. I think that that's the other piece that the puzzle is missing is if we really are going to be human, we have to actually sit there and treat students as human beings, and not just data points as what we do. And I think that also the problematic nature of just the educational system in the US in general is that we treat students as data points, and not as unique individual human beings, that we're trying to prepare for society moving forward. But I think that anything in nature that is tech AI based is extractive, and anything extractive is like colonization, and colonization is always going to be bad, no matter what you think about. Anything that's going to extract from something is always inherently going to harm somebody. Like somebody is going to be on the short end of the stick when you extract from something. And so all these systems do is extract, even though that there could be some positive things that can happen from it. But when anything is extractive, there's somebody or something that is being extracted from, and that person always gets the shortest end of the stick.
Shana, if I could follow up with you in particular in your work with Kapoor, just because I know, your work at, has been really focused and dedicated on like closing those tech gaps, especially for Black youth, and what you seem to be saying is like groups that are negatively harmed by the processes that you're talking about here. But like that's so embedded in your work, and also teaching kids about, an emphasis on digital literacy and digital citizenship and all of those things. How has that work changed for you, or how do you address those directly with like the young people that, are the target of your work?
Yeah, I would say it's complicated, but then it's also easy. Kids just want you to be human and be real with them. And they can smell bullshit a mile away, especially from adults. And I think that that's why it makes my job easier. And I prefer, as I was talking before the beginning of this, like I'm in a meeting with a whole bunch of people in the CS space, and adults literally, they all just go play in traffic as far as I'm concerned, because they just don't make decisions that are in the best interest of all kids. Everybody has a little bit of ego that they want to stroke to say that they are the best or they are the first or I'm doing this great thing, rather than saying like, is this beneficial for all people? And so what I try to do is when I go and work with teachers is I actually sit down and talk to the students, and ask them like, how can we help this teacher be more helpful for you in this class? What things are you interested in? Taking an interest in who they are as human beings, and having them to be able to have access to me. I give them my work email address. If you have a question, something comes up, you don't know what to do, send me an email. I'll figure out what I can do, try to connect you to somebody, what those types of things are. But I think, again, a lot of kids don't realize, as I said before, that there are adults in this space, like Charles, like Audrey, like V, that are working against these things, that are literally just trying to beat them down, because we want better for humanity. As V said, like we have to continue to bitch and moan, because if not, these people are going to just run us over. Like the AI train in education has left the station because of code.org and is running over people as we speak. And so we have to have people that are willing to either jump on the tracks, throw stuff at the train, etc., to slow this thing down so that we can go back to seeing kids as humans. And I think, again, the big thing is making sure that we're having those conversations with students, letting them know, hey, here are the pluses, here are the minuses, the pros and cons, because I feel like there is no ethical way to use AI in education. That does not exist, because ethical to me means do no harm. And AI either does harm to an individual, does harm to a group of people, or it does harm to the environment. So it is not ethical to use AI, but I think you can teach kids to say, can I use this tool responsibly, or do I even need this tool? And how do I think about what is the reason that I'm using this tool? Is it to complete this assignment so I can just get an A, or do I really care about learning this material? So it's having those kind of conversations with students so that they realize that they're more than just a right answer or a data point, because we've ingrained in our education system that testing is the only thing that marks what one kid's intelligence level is, which of course is a eugenics thing. But to sit there and say, hey, I want you to be able to like enjoy learning. That's what I tell my own two kids. Like, I don't really care about your grades. I just care that you enjoy learning, because I enjoy learning. Like, there's so many things to learn about the world at large. And so learning to me should be fun. And I want kids to have that idea of learning. And I think AI is going to take that away, and it is taking that away. The idea of learning for fun, it's just to get a quick answer, to complete this task, and kind of that whole, like I said, tech bros like to move fast and break things, and we're literally breaking kids' spirits, and we're breaking the education system that already is like dilapidated and decrepit and almost nearly being dismantled right now by the stupid fascists that's in the White House.
Now,
Can I
Gilberto,
just
give me just a sec. Oh,
can I
sorry.
just
I just want to give somebody else a chance to respond to that here. Go ahead, Audrey.
I just want to say, since the code.org was mentioned, that a lot of this, I mean, the level of severity that we're at right now in this country is very, 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 very high. And the connection with surveillance technology, artificial intelligence, and ICE explicitly is something that we need to be very aware of. This is not some sort of hypothetical that maybe someday the government's going to like read your text messages. This is a very real threat to everyone, to students in particular. And I think it's worth pointing out, and I always like to point this out, that the head of code.org is on the board of directors for Axon Technologies, which is the maker of police surveillance technology. And this is absolutely cop shit that we are embracing when we sort of allow this stuff in the classroom. This is not, and again, it might have, I feel like, like 10 years ago when I was saying this stuff, people would pat me on the head and say, or whatever, you and your conspiracy theories, Audrey, but like this stuff is techno-fascism, and it is here now, and students are experiencing the fallout of this, and we cannot, our obligation is to protect students, and we really, really have to make better decisions about who we allow in the building, literally, metaphorically, and technologically, and code.org is cop shit.
I tried to
Nick, can I
find
just,
Jeffrey
follow?
Morrow's
Yeah.
thing to post in here, but I got a 404. If anyone can find Jeffrey Morrow's piece against cop shit and post it in the chat, that would be great. Go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
Yeah, I just to follow up Audrey's point, and you made this point earlier, Audrey, about the long history of these technologies in schools. So you have things like GoGuardian, and you have things, other platforms that use AI to flag, quote unquote, dangerous speech that a student is looking up on the internet. And so, I think that in the focus on generative AI and the energy around that, that's important to consider how do we resist and refute those technologies, but also to understand how these surveillance technologies are already in our schools and already, really harming vulnerable populations. So I think that's important to recognize as we talk about sort of the diversity of these technologies, such that they cohere around surveillance in different kinds of ways, particularly given our current political situation in the United States.
All right, Gilberto, thanks for waiting patiently. What do you got?
So a little bit of my background. I'm a software engineer, designer. My master's degree is in human-computer interaction, and I'm also part of HRP. So it's this weird, perfect moment in this meeting of all of my background. Yeah, no, I've heard a lot. Something about AI I wanted to clarify, like the technology in itself wasn't originally Gen AI. There was a lot of scientific use, a lot of like real implementations that really are pushing humanity forward, but obviously the capitalist class saw a neat chat bot built into it and decided to run it to the ground. I really do think that we'd have to oppose this like move. I think there is a lot to learn. I'm genuinely really scared for some of the behaviors that I've seen and learned about in schools and just in cognition and like in emotional, like the way people have attached themselves to like this digital psychosis kind of thing. Like that is absolutely terrifying. Like the way people just being mimicked, almost human speech just captures them. I tried very hard, like something that I know Chris has told me is like an implementation of AI in the educational sense, but it's not in the use of students. It's more like qualitative data analysis. like being able to like go through feedback of students, but it's like that is a layer behind. Like it's almost like the technology itself should almost be reserved to people that are experts in the field. Like that is a tool that I should be the like people like me should be the ones that really take a hold of it and like make the software and like and the implementations about it that are try to be non-exploitative. I don't know how we can get to the non-exploitative state at this point. I do think there's gonna be a bubble pop coming up. Same thing happened with crypto. Like a few years ago, we would have been all talking about crypto and how that's gonna take over, and it just didn't. The thing about what's happening now, in my opinion, I think is more to do with how it has this user-facing like approach that's like you just type in a website, ChatGPT, and you're there, and you can just type in a chatbot thing, and like it's so easily the UI is so simple, but it is so deceptively simple that it takes away the effort that it takes to actually do the things that it's supposed to do. And obviously we can go into like how it just creates content if it doesn't find it and makes people think that they've discovered the truth behind everything, including some investors in OpenAI, which is wild.
Now, Gilberto, before we keep going, do we want to give people, our panelists, a chance to respond to that, perhaps?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Could I jump back in?
Go ahead, V, of course.
So this is so fascinating, and I think that without a doubt, there are so like the avalanche of challenges and the realizations that what AI has wrought. But I do think it's very interesting that all the problems that existed before, the perpetuation of racism, misogyny, all these things were built into textbooks, and we have trained generations of people to actively challenge, build curriculum on how to push that back. And I think maybe something that's really interesting here is several people have mentioned how much kids hate AI. Yes, we saw it too. And that is a good thing because it shows that the immune system that teens and young people have for bullshit is strong and robust. And that means the onus is on adults who have failed kids, teachers who have failed kids, parents who have failed kids, communities that have failed kids, to keep on trying to not fail kids, right? And I think maybe there have been many programs, many initiatives, many individual endeavors to wrestle with how they will teach AI and communicate AI to their own kids and in their own profession. So something that I think is very intriguing that I've seen with our community partners and the nonprofits who have gone from zero AI work to now reconciling themselves to it is something as simple as, well, how am I using the AI, right? So we have all this pedagogy and we have all this andragogy on the human brain. We have like brain science around how people interact with text, with images, with tactile sensations. So there is, from what I understand, my limited understanding on how people learn is that there is a agitated itch when you learn anything, right? When you try to puzzle through like an equation, or when you try to put together a sentence. And teachers, like analog style for years, have tried to get kids past that itch, right? Like get them past the frustration, because frustration it helps you learn, right? You fall off the bicycle, you self-correct. So when you watch people use AI, the concern, the very valid and terrifying concern, is the lift replaces the cognitive itch, right? The pain around learning. That's why generative slop, like the generative aspect of AI, the extractive nature is so passive and so easy, it lulls. But how do we keep the itch in there, right? The tension, the frustration around learning. That's what teachers have always done. That's what people have always done. So I'll end with this. When, you know, I forget the origins of this of the story exactly, but isn't it true that during the industrial age, workers would throw wrenches into the machinery? That's where we get the term, you know, throwing monkey wrenches in there to slow down the machinery. That type of intentional, resilient sabotage is what you see when you're informed on how the machinery works. So it's just because we have all these AI challenges, it doesn't abdicate adults from actively teaching themselves, educating themselves on how the machinery works, so that you know, you can speak and create those spaces, and those same individuals who see to see what's really going on, they will become the computer science engineers. They will become the developers, the users, and the future technology educators to show you, you know, to sort of perpetuate better AI.
Thank you, V. And I appreciate the patience of people with their hands raised. I'm going to assert my moderator privilege just for a second, because as soon as I heard V alluding to throwing wrenches into things, I thought about a very particular conversation that Charles and I had last year about this notion of Luddite pedagogies. And I want to see if maybe that can help us build a bridge towards like what does you know, what does the education like in this world look like? What could be a vision of that, Charles? I know you've been a deep, you know, thinker and writer on the ground of how, you know, we make these kinds of things actionable.
Yeah, I mean, I owe the origin of Luddite pedagogies to Audrey. So I think it was part of a keynote several years ago that has stayed with me for years. But you know, we've seen this uptick. You know, I've got Brian Merchant's book Blood and Machine in front of me here, and others, Paris Marks and his work on his podcast Tech Won't Save Us, sort of reclaiming the Luddites as an identity and as a political movement for education. I think is a real opportunity to, again, sort of think about what are the relations that we want to have to technologies, AI, or, you know, EdTech broadly, based in human dignity. Thinking about, you know, a lot of the conversation is, you know, what if we were to reimagine, you know, the kind of ecosystems that where there could be, you know, more ethical uses of these technologies, or any technology within schools. I mean, again, the Luddites were not anti-technology, but they were anti-capitalism, essentially. So, you know, what sort of small scale, which is like a word that I feel like is you know, antithetical to big tech, right? That what would be, you know, technologies that were built on the ground with that sort of data sovereignty in mind, with people sort of willingly entering into a relationship with a neighbor or someone that they knew about using their data to produce these technologies, and then they could retract that at their own, you know, whenever they feel like it. So yeah, I think that this notion of Luddism, I think, is important to consider, not just for us individually, but in spaces like this too, of like, what does collective resistance look like? What does it look like, you know, in your particular context? Because I think the Luddites also help us to understand that a lot of these movements were situated in a particular region in England, but that there were common practices across the different groups, but also they were distinct in a lot of ways. And so I think there's an opportunity to sort of, again, sort of in this resurgence of the Luddites for really sort of the second or third time in history, to think about, you know, what are the kind of collective actions that we need. AFT is not going to lead the way, right? American Federation of Teachers has really kind of thrown a lot of educators under the bus. And so I think it needs to be this more sort of small groups, right? Your fellow teachers, whether in your school or across different digital spaces, to come together and think about what does that resistance and refusal look like, and understand resistance and refusal not as simply a stance of no, but an opportunity to sort of reimagine what is sort of the humanizing pedagogy that, you know, is the Human Restoration Project. So yeah, I think there's a real kind of opportunity to reclaim this history and this identity, and sort of move forward in this time of peril.
Got it. So appreciate that. I'll give any other panelist a chance just to respond, and then I'll get to Zishan Vaidani over here. All right. Zishan, let's hear from you. He's got to get to his computer real quick.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Whose shared experience here today is wrong? Who brought an experience or perspective that's incorrect here today? I don't think anyone did. It's just unfortunate that we didn't get to collectively, you know, pause time and travel to each other's places to experience this stuff firsthand and bridge the gap in understanding that we're collectively experiencing right now. When Gilberto talks about the CEO with psychosis, like delusional psychosis, I can't tell my wife that today, Gilberto. She's not going to get the context. I want to spend 20 minutes going about how people go into this and literally get psychosis, and you have to bridge it into the topic. Like V or Y, excuse me, pronunciation. Like everyone who's showing up and like the people who my wife is like, they're speaking today at your event. I'm like, I'm just watching it. I don't even work in public ed. I work in the IT sector. And this is another thing where we have to look at like what are the economies? And it's like Vietnam has got the coffee and they're going through climate change. The West Coast of Africa has got the chocolate, they're going through climate change. The climate change makers are in Silicon Valley. And we are making Microsoft 365 products. And people have a subscription. They used to have a purchase, a subscription, perpetual license. Like this is just the biggest self-circle jerk on like who can be the billionaire with the double billionaire with the TR, the trillionaire. This is all that is. This is all. And the unfortunate part is these people are not the engineers and creators. It's everyone. Everyone in their little pocket of suffering or California or wherever are the innovators on the ground. And like people were saying, yeah, you know what? AI is also a tool where AI, if you define it as automation, is what happens when you click the power button on your computer and your computer turns on and all the little dominoes fall. That's automation. AI is artificial intelligence. Personally, I don't think that's real. I don't think there's an actual artificial intelligence. There's machine learning. There's generative stuff like that pulls from copy and pasting. And it's like, if you go into the pro mode and look at this stuff, all it'll be like, it was the most intense Googler you've ever seen. That's all it is. It's someone who's like, you don't know how to ask good questions. The literacy, the comprehension rate, you don't know how to ask good questions at all. So put it in ChatGPT and don't worry about literacy. I'll comprehend for you. Because honestly, on the SQL table, on the database stuff, on scraping up stuff, and looking at the terms of like hearts and minds, if you convert a data scientist over to giving a shit about public ed, if you open someone's mind, they will tell you how good it is. But you have to look at the technology thresholds. It's like, you know what, my parents were immigrants to this country in terms of like the legal borders. My mom's indigenous to this continent, but legally she's an immigrant. I will always say that when they came to this country, growing up, they both had to go somewhere else, get water, bring it home, boil it, cool down, drink it. I love America for having, when I was born in 91, I turned a tap and my favorite thing, clean and hot and water comes out, right? The people who built these things, did they suffer during it? Yeah. Do we grieve it? Do we talk about reparations? Definitely not. Anyways, like the next capitalism chase keeps occurring. The technology stuff in terms of like generating AI, bullshit, no, agree. The cost worth it? No. The data scraping to make sure that we know people who are in prisons who are left behind and what the guy is doing on the iOS platform with the Ice Block application, doing it only on the Apple environment because of data security stuff. Using it, as someone would phrase, the master tools against them. And I know there's a school of thought where you can't use the master tools to break the system from within. It's like, are we going to be mad when all of a sudden someone flips their heart and mind because they're going to chase the job anyways? Like, sorry, the money that you need to pay your mortgage comes in the form of dollars, and they don't give a shit if you really do such a good job educating, right?
Hey, Zishan, I'll interrupt just for a second. Forgive
Yeah.
me, friend.
No,
I
no,
just wanted to give our panelists a chance to sort of respond to the ideas there. I appreciate though what you led off with there, like whose lived experience in all of this is wrong. And I don't know if that's the right way to
I mean, it's just like,
to frame
I
it for
mean, yeah,
people
and for me, I
here.
was trying to
But
bring it down to like, if we look at the investments of technologies, it's like, is there a human cost? Yeah. Is it worth it yet? No. Technology, ecological cost, is it worth it yet? No. Eventually, it's worth it once we, as humans, develop the answer. Right now, they're just saying, hey, I can sell this, and I don't care about exactly what I'm sorry, I don't know people's names yet. What the previous speaker was talking about in Memphis, Tennessee. That is fucking real. That is fucking happening. Iowa here, water is fucking limited and it's going to data centers. And the literacy gap. And I come here looking at educators because yeah, y'all got it.
no, Zishan, thank you so much. I'll give our panelists a chance to respond to that.
One thing I would say is I think that if we look at things historically, which I like to do, is I think that what we're seeing with technology, with the computer industry, not just this sort of recent AI interests, but just sort of the internet technologies, is that we sort of saw this alongside the rise of neoliberalism. We saw the sort of dismantling of what was, for a very brief time in the U.S., sort of the sort of New Deal era of heavy government support for a variety of public services, including schools, but not just schools. And so as we sort of saw that get dismantled, first under Carter, then under Reagan, and then really, once Al Gore and Bill Clinton decided to get us on the information superhighway, we shifted into overdrive with neoliberalism. And we've really been in a period of austerity since then. And schools have been told you have to do more with less, which is, I think, one of the phrases I hate more than any other phrase in the world, do more with less. But the place that everyone's been pointed to, you're going to do more with less. We're not going to have taxes. We're not going to support these public services. We've pointed to the internet as being the place that's going to solve everything. And so I think really for the past 40 years or so, we've been dealing with austerity, rapidly increasing economic inequality, and been sold this idea that if you just hustle, right? If you just do the sort of entrepreneurial internet hustle, teach yourself, you can go on YouTube, you can learn anything, that's the solution. We've dismantled almost all of the public infrastructure, and quite literally now under Doge, like literally dismantling public infrastructure, and told, well, you have the internet now, so it doesn't matter. And I think we need to push back on both of those pieces. One is we definitely need to push back on this idea that somehow techno solutionism and buying their moose diarrhea is the answer. But we definitely need to actually invest in public institutions, in public infrastructure. And that is that sort of rebuilding the sort of the sort of foundational democratic institutions, and not not in some sort of nostalgic way that things were somehow great in the under Eisenhower. I mean, we got to build something completely different, but we really do need to reinvest in community, in public. And I think that we have to push back on the sort of austerity vision that has made computers somehow be the solution, when really the solution is, I think, revolution and the end of capitalism. But that's just me.
Other thoughts, panelists?
I mean, I would just echo, it seems like something that has cut across, in the comments too, is this, this invitation to really reimagine what is the purpose of education. Is that if we could continue down this, big tech version that ultimately is serving, Sam Altman and his buddies, or to sort of reclaim, right, sort of the radical, liberatory pedagogies and politics of the past, and implement those lessons for today. So I think that just seems like an emergent theme for me, is sort of using these technologies as a foil to both analyze the problems with them, but then also to sort of rebuild and build a new, our thriving societies, starting within our schools.
Other thoughts? Somebody had chimed in there.
Was going to, but
okay, sorry, Shana.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I 100% agree. I think I don't want to say reservations are, but my skepticism comes from, we were supposed to reimagine schools during COVID. And has anything changed? We still do the exact same shit, but now we just do it on a computer more often. There's more Chromebooks in everybody's school, all those types of things. I think the big thing is having people with the idea of, as I agree with Audrey, yeah, some of this stuff has got to be burned down. And in the process right now, we are burning stuff down because we have a literal fascist in the White House, as Audrey mentioned, the fact that he's dismantling public infrastructure, all of these types of things. And so just to kind of like re-emphasize that community piece and other human beings understanding what does community look like. It means not only just, having somebody's back and being there for them and creating a space. Like I always emphasize is we want brave spaces, because brave spaces are also spaces that are safe, but then people can be who they are. A lot of times with my students, I said, I don't want you to have a safe space, because a lot of times safe spaces are spaces that you don't feel comfortable failing in. But a brave space you feel comfortable failing in, because you know you're not going to be subjected to ridicule or being ostracized for those things. And so having more communities to create those kind of brave spaces to have like these types of discussions, but then also the same thing that I think is missing just in general is a level of accountability. People have been allowed to get away with shit for so long in the education system, and just in the world and society as large. And so how do we have more accountability mechanisms in place? And I think it goes back again to that, helping people know that they have the right to refuse these things, helping people understand how to mitigate the harms that some of these technologies, so if something's being done to them, how can I mitigate this? So it's not as harmful to me. But basically going back to getting the power in the hands of the people that need it, which are the people, and not these select few, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, white tech bros who, of course, as I said before, they literally believe in eugenics. They really, literally believe in literally their way or the highway, and not letting that continue to trickle down into schools. I want schools to be those brave spaces where kids can be human beings, and grow and prosper and not get sucked into this idea. I think also this AI machine has also caused this, like, we need to get the kids ready for the workforce. Like, I mean, capitalism sucks. Why are we getting kids just ready for the workforce? That's not what K-12 schools should be about. K-12 schools should not be about getting kids ready for the workforce. And I think we've let all that stuff seep in. We can track everything back to No Child Left Behind and good old George W. That everything in the education system has literally gone to pot since then. And so when we're thinking about a community building and those types of things, and the things that Charles mentioned as far as like reimagining something different, it's going to take the destruction of this old stuff, like a little, really little revolution to destroy. And then we have to have people that have the care and the ability to not only have accountability structures in place, but to also have community structures in place to build it up the right way so that all people are heard and seen in this new education community moving forward.
Very well said. Any other panelist responses? Now, if I could, Sonia, thank you for your patience here. Give me just a second. I want to bring something up here that connects to what Shana's talking about, connects to ideas floating around in the chat. And I promise I'll get to you here, because I hear all of this, right? And I'm trying to be a seeker on this issue. I've said before that obviously all of your work is swirling around in my brain. Basically, I have little mini versions of you all in dialogue with myself constantly as I think about these issues. And yet I don't think I'm ready to cede the power of either this industry, this tool, right, to literally the worst people in society. And I keep trying, right, to find. I put it in the chat. I was like, is there a possibility public AI? Somebody said an actually, open source AI that we can use for these good tools. Is it possible, right? I'm not willing to give it up. And maybe this is a question for V here, because I've seen, the way that maybe not right enhancing, but giving space and being a tool, right, to actually pursue democratic decision making and enable better decision making and more democracy and more student voice in particular, right? We saw this with the 100 days of conversations that HRP participated in around COVID as well, right? As a place for these conversations to take place. V, I was hoping perhaps you could speak to that, right? And that I'm not ready to give it up yet. Speak to the power of these things in the way you see it.
I think just hearing Audrey and Shana talk so passionately about AI really actually gives me hope, because that sort of powerful, compelling, like never give it upness is there. So to leverage it, I do think that even if you're an AI optimist, to really serve human-led AI, or to fight for justice and all these things we believe in, it might do us good. And this is a strategy we've seen from partners that work well, is to actually see the sabotage, like do like a murder board on exactly what how AI does go dark for us. And I think we've identified several spaces here. So that means if you can identify where the malice occurs in the categories, like create a typology of where it goes really bad, it actually will empower people. We've seen it with our partners. They start identifying where it fails so they can identify strategies to combat it or where it works. So this right to refuse is a very specific movement that I think you hear it as a concept, but it can be codified in curriculum, in teaching. This is going to I don't want to like ramble around it, but for example, a discussion we have is identifying types of where AI really fails or really creates havoc. So something like, there's the category of like basically just tech failure, the over reliance on, say, anything, to do anything from a presentation to run the highway system. If the technology grid fails or the AI fails, then everything fails. So there's a tech category sphere. Another is the human atrophy, like like the effect, identifying, and whatever disciplines you want to throw at that, psychologists, computer scientists who work with the human brain, cognitive neuroscientists. There is a body of research that speaks directly to how AI goes through your eyeballs and all that. And then there's the social categories, and then there's legal categories. And so if we can just start to identify the malice in these different groups, then we can articulate, and that's what we've seen our nonprofit partners do. They launch campaigns on education, they do workshops, they do books, they individual teachers have said, you know what, in this week, I'm gonna specifically focus on AI and have that dialogue with my students. So yeah, it's identify, like make your murder board, and then go strategically address the problems.
Thank you so much, V. Any other panelists want to respond to that real quick? And then I for sure want to get to Sonia. Well, Sonia, thank you so much for your patience. What have you got here? They've been waiting to ask.
Yeah, so I'm a student and I'm really interested in hearing all the perspectives from educators, because I also work with education as a student. So I'm kind of listening as both. And as having AI as it is now is like a new forming technology that now people are interacting with at a larger scale. I've talked to a lot of people with varying opinions on it, from don't touch it with a 10-foot pole to we need to learn about it. It's a new technology. And if we don't learn it, if we don't learn to use it, it's going to use us. And I, as a student, I have dyslexia. And I've talked to other neurodivergent students about using it to help kind of translate material that we're given that is incredibly difficult to understand. And so we can interact at a higher level. And somebody mentioned about like enjoying learning. So we can take it from struggling with material to actually enjoying the process of learning and really getting into it deeper and using AI as a tool for that. Because I have to use it because often I don't get the accommodations I need, even when I ask. And I've talked to other students that have experienced the same thing, and it's happening even more and more now because we're kind of damned if we do and damned if we don't. If we use AI, people look down on it, but if we don't, we struggle and get worse grades because we're not actually able to interact the way we need to get education, to go to the further place, to work on changing the system that we're in. So it's like, it's a double bind. So I just want to hear the panelists, anybody who has thoughts about like how to integrate this, because it's something that is very prevalent right now. And I hear a lot of people talk about like the negativity of it. And yes, it is affecting climate, but also people fly all over the world, and that's also creating extraordinary issues. And so it's very complex, and I'm interested to see if people have thoughts on using it for helping with education and being educated, instead of just it being kind of like an issue, because it can help people interact with information that they might not be able to otherwise. So thanks.
Before the panel responds, I just want to say thank you so much. I think to speak to Shana's idea of this as a brave space, like thank you for your vulnerability and honesty. And again, I would hope that nobody feels ashamed about having used or finding these tools useful. So thank you so much for sharing that. Go ahead, panel.
One of the things that I would say is I think that I think it's important to think about the ways in which I think it's, again, me pointing to history. I think it's interesting that in this moment when we've started to get more in schools, but also socially, more recognition of neurodiversity, that we would have this technology rise that's actually sort of a specific kind of neuronormativity, if you will, specific kind of reasoning get prioritized as being intelligence. And again, thinking about the history of the history of intelligence testing, and quite literally eugenics procedures that were very much designed at eliminating people, neurodivergent people from the population, right? Forced sterilization of autistic people, for example. And so my concern is always why are we asking marginalized people to do the work of adopting these technologies rather than changing changing the world to make the world more adaptive to them. And so it's not an easy answer in the meantime, of course, with everyday realities. But I do think that there is reason to sort of be cautious around these technologies and the kinds of, so I think, again, sort of the theme today has been imperialism, the sort of imperialist idea of a certain kind of reasoning, certain voice, certain language that is getting prioritized here, and asking marginalized people to sort of use that technology as a translator in order to fit into society, again, rather than reshaping society to sort of be more welcoming. In order to sort of, I think what we need to do is we need to make schools actually respond to people's different learning needs, not make people with different learning needs use this insidious technology in order to fit into a model of productivity that, again, seems to be, I think, catering to a particular capitalist enterprise that is extractive and exploitative and crushing us all. Right.
I think, as Audrey said, that's so important. I think somebody just said in the chat about the accessibility piece. Again, realizing who, like in the interrogation piece, as far as we are big proponents of at Capor Foundation in writing our guide of people being critical consumers of these technologies. We're not saying don't use these technologies. I might not use them, but I want you just to be critical of your usage of them. And I think in interrogating these technologies and critical usages, who sits behind the black curtain and makes these technologies? Because there is a human always in the loop, no matter what. Somebody has to write an algorithm for this machine to do what it tells it to do. I told my students all the time when I taught computer science in class, I didn't say the like ableist word, but I said computers are not smart. They literally are not smart. They don't do anything without a human being able to tell it to do. It's a piece of plastic and metal. That's it. It does nothing until a human tells it what to do. The on-off button, a human has to tell it to do that. Anything else, a human has to tell it to do that. So bringing back the fact that the people that are creating these systems, even tech, and as Audrey like eloquently mentioned, like AI has been around since the like late 50s. Like this is not new. This is not like revolutionary. There's no like a fear of being left behind. Like we're being left behind because we literally are living in a white supremacist society that will not cave. That's why we're left behind. And so to sit there and say, are these tools created with all populations in mind or just certain populations? And a lot of times I would say even in my classroom with middle school students, is what you're creating accessible for everybody? If somebody is visually impaired, can they use your tool? If somebody is hearing impaired, can they use your tool? If someone is physically disabled, can they use your tool? If somebody doesn't speak English as their native language, can they use your tool? And thinking about things from that realm, I think is very key. But most tech people, everything is going to be based on this cis heteronormative white male gaze. And so every tool that has been created sits in that cylinder. And so everybody that's outside of that cylinder, the tool is not made for them. And so their addition, I think somebody said a little while ago about people sitting at the table that are disabled, neurodivergent, et cetera, and building the table. Man, the table is not even built correctly for anybody to sit at, except a white man, like who's able-bodied. That's literally what everything has been built for. And so understanding that either A, I have to push the envelope and push back and bitch and moan and complain. I want these tools to be accessible to me or a demographic that I am in as far as a marginalized demographic, or I have to build my own. I mean, those are your two options, but most people that are in marginalized communities don't necessarily have the capital to build their own. So we're stuck being forced into these systems that are not built for us and forced to being using them. So I think, like I said before, I wouldn't say I'm anti-AI, I probably am anti-AI, but I am not the person that's going to tell adults what to do. My thing is, I just want you to be critical thinking and interrogating your usage of these tools. And especially, I want kids to do the same because, again, I want kids to just enjoy learning. And I think AI takes that away from them. I think technology tools literally lessen their ability to really engage with the process of educating and learning. And so I think that for me, I would just say I just want a critical interrogation of these tools when you're engaging with them rather than just literally just going off the cuff and just saying, I'm just going to use ChatGPT and just roll with it and just see what happens. I think that's the big thing. It's not, like I said, Audrey is usually the same wavelength with me. She's even what EdTech Cassandra. She's even more I love like Audrey like a sister, but just knowing that like these systems are not built for us. And so how do I sit there and either break them internally so that I can rebuild for everybody, or how do I build for myself so that I am building something that's more inclusive of all people?
And I wonder if that's a place. I forgive me, Zishan and Sonia, for not coming back to you here on this. I wonder if there's a space to bring that into the Discord after this, or perhaps to continue it in the chat. But just for the last 5 minutes, again, I'm so grateful and thankful for this conversation. I'll reiterate what Josh Rapoon said in the chat too, where just being able to have this conversation and grapple with the not just the complexity, the enormity, the responsibility, sort of all sides of this thing. And to echo something that that by Donnie said there too, that I think will be floating around with me for some time, which is like, whose story in this, it really is the right one, which one really matters. Incorporating all those perspectives, I think, is important to land the plane, if we could, in 5 minutes or so, because Shana, you had even said in 2 weeks, your kids go back to school, teachers are getting amped up for the year, and there's more both pressure, accessibility, everything else to like use these tools, I think, than we've ever seen before. But like in a real practical sense, how do we like achieve the world that we want for the pedagogies, everything else that we want for our kids when we head back into classroom and start considering schools and education and classroom for kids as soon as a month from now or 2 weeks, and we can
Right.
just hear from everybody here.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
would
Shane.
just say my big thing is, again, listen to students, listen to teachers. Those are the two voices that are always left out of every single equation when we're talking about what we're going to do in education. You have top-heavy districts where everything is just pushed down. I tell people all the time, when I was a teacher, I felt like policy was done to me. I was never engaged in policy. So I'm supposed to implement something that you've never actually been in a physical classroom to make possible, that I know is not possible. So talk to teachers, talk to students. They are curious, but teachers are sick of our shit. I'm just going to be completely honest. K-12 teachers are sick of our shit because we keep throwing stuff at them every single year. We don't pay them well enough. We treat them like crap. And then, of course, we have this federal government is attacking public education as it is and been trying to dismantle public education for years. So you have public school teachers that are just sick of everybody's shit. And so we don't give them time to do their job. So my two things that I always sit there and say is always ask students what they need to be successful as far as learning in a class, school, etc. And also feel brave in their class, like that they want to be there. Because again, with that brave space piece, we want people to want to come to school, and they have to want to come to school because they know they're going to be seen, they're going to be heard, they're going to be appreciated, they're going to be respected and recognized. And then the last thing, as I mentioned before, with teachers being tired of everybody's bullshit, is just also understanding that, like, basically we have to sit there and say, hey, teachers, what do you want? How can I help you be successful? And there's two things that these tech bros can do that would be very, very easy. You can give teachers time to work on stuff or money. And they are unwilling to do both of those things. So next time somebody comes into your school with some new ed tech tool, whatever, how is this going to give me more time to be successful as a teacher? Or how are you going to give me money to use this tool? Until that happens, going back to the capitalism thing, like we're just up a creek, because capitalism is just going to continue to ruin public education in general. So what can we do to give teachers time and money to be able to do their jobs well would be the second thing that I would say.
Excellent. And I bumped here. Sorry, Charles. I bumped the Kapoor Foundation's Guide for Responsible AI and EdTech in here too, so folks can access that in the chat. Sorry, Charles, go ahead.
No, the other group I would add, one of the things I'm going to continue to do is be a real pain in the ass at my daughter's pick up and drop off with all of my fellow caregivers. And so I think that's another sort of coalition that can and should be built with students and with teachers, is to think about, when the administration, my daughter goes to public school here, is selling us on a new technology or AI hype, is to think about, well, what is organized resistance look like from caregivers with students, with teachers, because often these technologies are just foisted upon teachers, students, but also caregivers. And so I think that's one sort of source of agency that I'm hoping to take into this coming academic year.
Thanks, Charles. I'm going to make space both for Audrey and V for sort of closing in the same way we did for the opening as well.
Mine is very fast. I would say this has been very inspiring, and I think staying curious, use AI, and be very self-observant, because yes, the tools aren't built for certain groups, but that's because those certain groups aren't building the tools. As a point of interest, two of our brightest graduate students in the MIT Media Lab are named Cassandra. So that tells you exactly who's trying on the forefront to build this technology. Become your own user experienced testers. It's not all like, putting in a prompt and a response. It's extraordinary what people are actually asking, the type of questions. For those who are already skilled, AI can create a incredible feedback to them. It can create a jump start. It can create inspiration. It can lead to unexpected places. So I think that curiosity is so important, as well as that concern.
I guess I'll close by saying when I was first asked to be on this panel, and before Nick gave us sort of what we were going to be talking about, I thought, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to spend all my time talking about how much I love Shana and how much she means to me and how much she has like personally made such a huge difference in my own life. I saw many years ago her powerlifting and thought, what an absolute fucking badass that she was pulling like 300 pounds barbells up off the floor, and decided to try it myself. And so there's just no way. I don't lift anywhere near as much, but like, I just think that I just have endless love and admiration and gratitude for her and for her work and for our friendship. And I think I want to extend that we have to take care of each other right now. We have to recognize the work that we do. And I think that we all do, that we're all trying very hard. And there is some heavy shit that we have to pick up and probably put down again, and then pick it up again and put down again. And I'll extend the weightlifting metaphor. It doesn't get easier, right? Because then as you get stronger, you just add more weight on the barbell, right? There isn't an easy button. There isn't a push button that gets this done. There's no such thing as a frictionless life. It's fucking hard, but we can do it. We can do it together. We can do it because we have each other. And so thank you, Shana, for being so awesome.
I think literally we could not have asked for a more powerful, positive, humanizing closing statement there. And I, again, just so appreciate y'all grappling with this big, slick, oiled up pig that we got to all grapple with here, headed into classrooms, whether we're parents, whether we're students, whether we're teachers. This thing is here and it's real, and we have to, wrestle with the full weight of it. And I think the only way to do that, right, recognize each other's humanity, and really figure out, what tools and what things are going to allow us to live that out in its fullest, and not let the tool sort of lead the conversation, as it were. So again, just a huge thank you to all of you for spending the time with us all today. I will just remind people too that in about 45 minutes, so we get a quick lunch, quick coffee break, Dr. Emma McMain is going to be leading us through that workshop on critical SEL, something I think I'm going to be in need of a lot of after having moderated this discussion. But I'm looking forward to carrying this conversation over in the Discord. It just seems like such a rife spot for insight, community, and for connectivity. So again, thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, V. Thank you, Shana. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. Take care.